All right, welcome back. We are starting the next part of Unit 5, which is a couple of slides on presidential campaigns, and then we start campaign finance. We will finish it up next time around and talk about our last Supreme Court case at that time as well. So let's get started. Hopefully we can do this all in one shot, so one video for us. All right, so the presidential campaign we're talking about now, it's media-driven, media. We're talking the last 20 years, it's high-tech, as high-tech as it can get. Remember, we talked about this when we talk about voters. Technology allows more and more focus on individual voters. They can use this unbelievable technology to individually target people. The last several elections, Facebook, Twitter, plus now all of the stuff that you guys use, the Snapchats and the Instagrams and all of that stuff, they're all used in a very high tech way in campaigns these days. Those things then drive things like direct mail, and as well as of course raising money. There's a boatload of money is raised on the internet, and that's again new in the last 15-ish years or so. And then remember, and we'll talk about the media again right after spring break, and we've talked about this before, that the news organizations focus on everything except the issues, right? They focus on the horse race, of course. That's where they get the most. Hang on. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so remember these news organizations, remember they do everything they can. They speculation, the strategy, horse race, of course, more than anything else. And then the issues are the last thing that they talk about. All right, and then the last thing for the presidential campaigns, they do have an organization. We have to know some idea about some of these positions. They have a campaign manager who runs the campaign, and they have assistant campaign managers, and they're responsible for the entire campaign. Just as a side note, since we're March, and March is the Women's History Month, the first woman to ever successfully run a presidential campaign, so one where the campaign that she was managing, that candidate won, was Kellyanne Conway in 2016 for President Trump. So just as I mentioned for Women's History Month, there was a first there. They have fundraisers. They have a chief fundraiser and then all sorts of fundraisers working underneath. And funds, of course, are one of the biggest things that they do. They have a counsel, a lawyer, and a counsel's office. So they have a chief counsel and then those that work for them. This is a big part of campaigns because of the number of regulations, especially in the finance area, that have to be navigated. They have to be done correctly and they have to be done legally. And it takes a big slew of lawyers to make sure that all that stuff gets done properly. Media consultant or consultants, these are the ones who organize the advertising and things like that. They do what's called the ad buys and those kind of things, coordinate with the media. Then, of course, there's lots of staff all under the campaign manager. Then there's policy advisors. They got these two people are my foreign policy advisors, and these people are my domestic policy advisors. And then they even have policy advisors more specific than that. They have a pollster. So they have a polling company or a pollster that they hire and use to do their internal polling that you usually don't see. That is not the polls you see that the news organizations do and everything else. This is their own internal stuff. So they know they have the exact idea of what's going on, while those other polls might not be right. They, of course, have a press secretary. This is the main contact with the media. Essentially the same thing as a press secretary like you see today with Biden or you had with Trump, the person who is their liaison essentially with the media. And, of course, there's a website. And they're a lot more slick than they used to be. I remember some of those first websites back in the early 2000s. These things are a lot more slick than that, as you might imagine. All right, so let's talk about the meat of this part of the unit, campaign finance. So we've got a few slides to deal with, and then we'll finish up next time around. So campaign finance. This phrase comes from the early 20th century in politics. Money is the mother's milk of politics, and that is absolutely true. You cannot do it without money. It is very regulated, very confusing. That's why you need all those lawyers to handle all of this correctly. It starts out, when we talk about regulation, it starts out with what's called, in 1974, the Federal Election Campaign Act. So you have to know this. This was an attempt to bring the campaign finance stuff out into the open. Instead of, prior to this, it was all under the table stuff because lots of things were illegal. So it was done anyway, just under the table. So let's make some things legal and put some regulations around it. So it did a couple of things. Number one, it creates what's called the Federal Election Commission, an independent regulatory agency back from Unit 2 in the bureaucracy. It's created to administer the campaign finance laws and then enforce compliance. That's what they do. This thing provided matching funds for public financing of primaries and general elections, which is out there for the presidential election, although it does limit campaign spending too. So the last time public funds were used by John McCain running for president in 2008. So Obama didn't use public funds then, and then every candidate since has not used public funds because it limits how much you can spend. And so John McCain did not have enough money to compete, so that was the best he could do, was get that public money. And it does require, and this is the thing, let's bring it into the open, it requires disclosure. Who contributed and how much? And that is a big deal. That is something that's important. When you did that interest group project, remember, I had that website on there called Open Secrets. The information from the FEC, their databases, is what creates a website like that for you to look at. All right, and of course, then it limited campaign contributions. So it required disclosure, and then it limited some things. We'll talk about the things that it limited. And the first court case, which is not one of our big ones, but you have to know what Buckley versus Valeo does. Okay? It challenged the constitutionality of limiting individual campaign contributions and spending. Okay? What it did, the end result of Buckley, it upheld most of the other limits, but it did say that a candidate can spend any amount of their own money that they want to. It was unconstitutional to stop, say, if Moran had $100 million and he wanted to run, I could spend all $100 million if I wanted to on that. There's no personal limit for your own money, for your own campaign, okay? Because there are limits, and we'll talk about those actually in the next time around. We'll talk about what those limits are, because there are limits to how much you can give to this candidate, that candidate, or the other candidate. All right, we have to know the difference between these two things, and this is the big two types of money. Hard money and soft money. So direct contributions to individual candidates, those are called hard money. If I wanted to contribute money to Joe Biden to run for president, I can do that, and that's called hard money. And then that campaign can use that money to run for president, run ads, do all the other stuff for the campaign. Money donated separately to the party organization, their RNC or the DNC, that is called soft money. It's for party building. It's for grassroots organizing. It's generic advertising. That's all called soft money. That's not subject to contribution limits now, and that's as a result of Citizens United. To give you an idea, 2000 election, a total of about $500 million, and a lot more these days, was raised as soft money. AT&T and AFSCME to work. So AT&T, AFSCME is a union conglomerate organization. Each gave about $3 million to the parties to do these other things. The only thing that can't be done is they can't then give that money to candidates. Okay, then it would become hard money, and soft money cannot be turned into hard money. Okay, let's talk about McCain-Feingold. This is the next thing that came around in 2002. It was campaign finance legislation. It banned soft money. All that soft money became illegal. It increased the hard money limit, though, because they knew that money was needed to run. So the hard money was added to $2,000 per person, per candidate, per election. So what that means is if you wanted to support Biden, you could give him $2,000 for the primary election, and then if he becomes the candidate, then you can give him $2,000 more, okay, per candidate, per election. It barred outside groups from running what are called issue ads, and this is what's going to get into the Citizens United thing when we get there next time around. If they refer to a specific candidate within 60 days of a general election or 30 days of a primary, you couldn't run ads. You could not run ads in the United States of America. You could not run ads as outside groups. Okay. It's also called, so if you see it, it's called BCRA, or Bipartisan Campaign Finance Reform Act. We usually just call it McCain-Feingold, though. All right, a couple more slides. We have to talk about these PACs, political action committees. We've actually mentioned them before, right? We're going to talk a little bit more detail today and then next time. So it's a political action committee, right? Prior to 74, corporations and unions, like I said, were barred from donating money. They did it anyway. It was under the table. So let's get this stuff over the table, okay? So a more open way is created so we can track it. Interest groups can now set up these political action committees to directly contribute to candidates. And there was, at that time, there was a $5,000 limit. And so there were a few that got started, and so by now there's, of course, more than 5,000 PACs today. And all that stuff has to be meticulously reported, and all the legalities have to be followed to the FEC, which is what's under my name or my picture there, the FEC. Okay, last thing, 527 groups. The last thing for today. 527 groups are a bigger category. They are the tax-exempt organizations that are created to influence elections, that came out of McCain-Feingold, out of the laws of McCain-Feingold, that they added this. 527 is like the legal section, like it's code this, and this. Section 527 is about this particular idea for campaign finance. The controversial 527 groups are PACs and super PACs. We'll talk more about super PACs next time around. But so PACs, so 527 groups are a bigger umbrella than PACs. So PACs can be 527 groups, and super PACs are 527 groups. They allow unregulated advocacy spending as long as it's not coordinated with the specific party or campaign. So that's what came about with these groups. You can spend unlimited amounts of money, but you just can't coordinate. Like a liberal group cannot coordinate with the Biden campaign, or a conservative group could not coordinate with the Trump campaign. If you believe that coordination never happens, I got swampland to sell you. But it is what it is. That's what they say, that they can't do that. And you cannot expressly advocate for or against a candidate. So a 527 group's ad they can say all that they want about Biden. Biden's great, Biden's good, or Biden's bad, Biden sucks. The only thing they can't do is say, so therefore vote for Biden, or therefore don't vote for Biden, or therefore vote for Trump, or don't vote for Trump. That's the only thing they can't do. So you can rock right up to the line, but you can't cross it. And then the last two things, then PACs. PACs are dedicated, generally PACs that are dedicated to a policy or a cause tend to always donate the same way. A pro-abortion PAC is not going to donate to the Republicans. They're going to donate to the Democrats. A pro-life PAC is not going to donate to the Democrats. They're going to donate to the Republicans. Okay, so they tend to always donate in the same way. It's different for trade groups and corporations. That money tends to follow the power. So what you'll see is a company or a corporation, if they do this, they might split their money. When we look at, if you look at Open Secrets, you can see that, like, you see the biggest one, the Realtors Association, they sort of split their money. They want to make sure, depending on who wins, that they've got some influence. Yeah, we did give you some money. Yeah, even though we might have given that guy a little bit more, but we did give you some. So they kind of trail that, or if it looks like one side's getting more power, they'll start to do more for that side if they anticipate that side winning or something like that. So they're much more of a double giver than PACs that are dedicated to a single policy or whatnot. So okay, so that's that for today. You do have one assignment, a reading assignment about 527s. Excuse me, and then next week will be the last part of this before the quiz at the end of the week. So have a great one, have a good weekend, and we'll see you next